Good morning. I'm John Amman, President and CEO of the Westside Future Fund. Welcome to our live broadcast. We have a very special live broadcast this morning because I'm coming to you from the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, a very special chapel on a very special day. And as we come to you, I'm actually live right now in the library of the chapel. And you can look around with me to see the incredible pictures around the walls in the library of the chapel. And see all the great leaders that have come from the West Side, great leaders from around the world that have visited this chapel, great leaders that Dr. King drew inspiration of. And see Mahatma Gandhi on the wall. And as we reflect too, I want to acknowledge this is Juneteenth Day, a very special recognition, a holiday of African-American community, of signing the Emancipation Proclamation. And also want to begin the broadcast acknowledging the pain that our city is still in and the senseless killing of Mr. Brooks. And last week, I talked to one of our summit panels, Xavier, who knew Mr. Brooks, walked with Mr. Brooks, and he's in a lot of pain. He's been out there protesting, but also thought coming live from the broadcast from the King Chapel about how we move together as a community. How do we come together and build a new Westside future together as a community? And one thing I love about a library are books. And Dr. King would say when you go to jail, I have time to read books. And these are some of the books from my library that I drew inspiration from. You know, Abraham Lincoln, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation. I picked another great book up, Dream a World Anew, when I visited the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. It's an extraordinary experience. If you haven't visited that museum, I would encourage you to do so. And now I want you to walk with me, and I'm going to walk out of the library, and I'm now walking into the King Chapel, and it is a beautiful chapel. And so now I'm walking into the chapel, and I'm inside the chapel, but last weekend, you know, I walked the chapel, walked the campus grounds with Todd Green, the president and CEO of the Atlanta University Consortium. And one of the things that I saw was a story statue outside of the chapel. And so we wanted to show you that statue. And so you can see from the outside, you know, the Morehouse King Chapel. And if you've never visited the Morehouse King Chapel, I would encourage you to do so because it's a beautiful chapel, as you can see from the outside. And last weekend, there's some extraordinary quotes at the base of the statue. And I'm going to read one that I thought spoke to the moment, and it was and the quote is, and it's at the base of the statue of Dr. King: if we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must become economical rather than sectional. Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means we must develop a world perspective. No individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. And as long as we try, the more we're going to have war in this world. Know the judgment of God is upon us, and we must learn together, live together as brothers, or we're all going to perish together as fools. And you're seeing right now, as I'm talking, the outside of the chapel and the shots and the wisdom of those words. And we're going to be diving more in our summit broadcast this morning into the meaning of some of those words with some of the great panelists we have later this morning. And so now, you know, we're back live on me, and we're back inside the King Chapel, and I'm going to be walking up now, and you can see the beautiful organ in the King Chapel. And we just wanted you, since you can't be here with us, to be able to look around and see what I'm seeing. And so you can see how beautiful this is. You know, I've been here different times. Unfortunately, was here at a time when we were mourning the loss of a great Westside leader, Ivory Young, a former council member. And so now we also want you to take a look at the crew. I want to thank the crew that's bringing you this live broadcast. The same crew have been with us the last 7 live summits. So thank you, crew. And now, you know, as we shift, to get to the rest of our program this morning, I want to first just say thank you, and he's one of our guests this morning. I want to first begin by saying thank you, Dr. Thomas, who welcomed us and allowed us to broadcast from the Sacred Praise to King Chapel. So thank you, Dr. Thomas, and thank you, Morehouse College, for letting us be here this morning. But I want to talk a little bit more now so you know who's bringing you this live broadcast, the Westside Future Fund. For those of you that are new, our vision, mission, and values. So you can, we're going to put up that slide so you can see what our vision, mission, and values are. All right, great, thank you. So our vision, mission, and values. Our vision is how we can help bring a community Dr. King we're proud to call home. We've got a great board of directors, a volunteer board of directors. Actually, our board chair, Dr. Beverly Tatum, the former president of Spelman College, who has a best-selling book right now, Why All the Black Kids Eat Together in the Cafeteria, has been speaking nationally on the issues that we're confronting as a country, as a city. And the last, I want to make sure you see the team of the Westside Future Fund, so I want to show that slide, the great team we have at Westside Future Fund. So thank you, team. And then also want to encourage you, because one of the things we're still practicing during COVID is social distancing, but we can still get connected, and we want to get you connected electronically so we can, there we are, so you can connect to us. We encourage you, if you're watching the live broadcast and think this is something your friends or colleagues might enjoy, to get them connected as well. And want to make sure you have our bulletin this morning. So our bulletin's up on our website, so you can learn about our program. Our table of contents talks about today, and it has the bios on all the speakers. And make sure that you grab hold of the bulletin. And we also are going to do this morning, as we did 2 weeks ago, a giveaway, the Home Depot gift card. So if you want to have an opportunity to win that gift card, please go register on our website, and we're going to say the name toward the end of our broadcast. But you can see in our program this morning, we're about to move into a devotion that we do for every one of our summits. And once we come out of our devotion, we're going to begin our live broadcast. And we've got 3 great guests this morning I'm going to be interviewing and talking to about creating the beloved community. But to begin our devotion, we're lucky to have Dr. Reverend Marcus Watkins give our devotion. And for those that are new, we always do a devotion. We always have different devotion speakers, and we draw inspiration from the devotion, from the story of Nehemiah in the Bible, of how Nehemiah rebuilds Jerusalem to make it safe and builds a new city together based on common values. But as we move into devotion, we're always mindful to read a statement, and I read the statement every time before we begin the devotion. I'm going to do that now. It's become our tradition to begin our meetings with a positive, inspirational message from a member of our community. Recognizing that many in our community are driven by their spiritual faith to participate in the Westside revitalization effort, the time at the beginning of our meetings is an opportunity to share various inspirational reflections. While the speakers may articulate their personal faith, it's meant to be inclusive, inspiring, and meaningful, with the story of Nehemiah as our guide. And we did a pre-taped devotion with Reverend Marcus Watkins, who ministers at the Simpson Church of Christ. He began preaching at the age of 13. And what I really appreciate Reverend Watkins, his church owns some great land along Boone. And I know he has a real heart for the community, because he wants to working hard to open up some of his facilities to serve the community with early learning, and perhaps doing some more multifamily housing, affordable housing with partners on this side. So thank you, Reverend Watkins. Hopefully you're watching the broadcast. So thank you for your leadership in your church, and thank you for giving the live broadcast, our devotion this morning. So now we're going to cut to the pre-recorded devotional from Reverend Watkins, and then come back to our live broadcast.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus T. Watkins, as you've just heard. I'm the senior minister of the Simpson Street Church of Christ here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm thankful for this great opportunity to be a part of this Westside Future Fund Summit and to bring you the devotion on today. God will make a way, but oftentimes He uses us to clear a path. When we look around our world, our nation, and especially our community, it does look bleak if you're on the outside looking in. Many view the situation as hopeless, but there's always hope when God is on our side. So I want to bring you a word of encouragement today, because there's so much going around. There's so much discord. There's not only a pandemic, but there's also pandemonium. So I want to give you a word of encouragement today. How do you survive not just the pandemic, but the pandemonium? And I believe that God has the answer. I don't believe that there can be peace without righteousness. And there's some scriptures that I want to look at today. You always have to have a reason to believe that we're not always going to be in the situation that we're in right now. You have to believe with all of your heart that things will get better in the future. But I believe that the Word of God has a prescription for things to get better. So there are a couple of scriptures I'm going to give you today, if you don't mind. I want to first of all look at Isaiah chapter 32. Isaiah chapter 32 and verse number 17, the Bible says, "And the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness and assurance forever." Isaiah, this great prophet, said that the work of righteousness is peace. And one of the reasons we cannot have any peace is because there is not righteousness. Dr. King used a lot of metaphors and pictures that originated in the Old Testament as pictures and ideas. In the Messianic kingdom, he says that the lion will lay down with the lamb and the wolf. That's Isaiah chapter 11 and verse number 6. But what we have to understand it in the Old Testament, justice, the word justice is synonymous with righteousness. In the Old Testament, a just person is a righteous person. And so that is what Isaiah 32:17 is talking about. He says, "And the works of righteousness shall be peace." It is used interchangeably. God's justice is his righteous because God is a just God. We sometimes cry, no justice, no peace, but there can be no peace without justice. There is no righteousness outside of God because his law is righteous. Righteousness is the fruit, but peace. Righteousness is the root, but peace is the fruit. Righteousness and justice are inseparable. And there's another scripture I want to look at, and I taught this a few weeks ago to our congregation in 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4, there's something that Peter says, and I believe that it speaks to all of us today. Peter talks to these disenfranchised individuals about how to handle the sufferings and the struggles of life. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 through 14, Peter says, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trials, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened unto you." Peter then, he gives something that is extremely difficult, because keep in mind, Peter is talking to individuals who are being brutalized and abused and some even killed and murdered by Nero, who was the king at this time. And so Peter tells them, don't think it's some strange thing when these fiery trials come onto your life. And then he said something in verse number 13 that really and truly blew my mind. Peter gives them the command to rejoice. In other words, Peter says the things that you're going through, you have to find a way to rejoice. And so the question becomes, how can I rejoice in the midst of the suffering? How can I rejoice in the midst of chaos? How can I rejoice in the midst of calamities? How can I rejoice in the midst of a pandemic? How can I rejoice in the midst of pandemonium? Peter says it is absolutely, not only is it possible, Peter says it is absolutely necessary. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 13, he says, "But rejoice." Now, in the Greek, it really says, keep on rejoicing. In other words, Peter says you need to rejoice now, just like you rejoiced before you got into your trials and your tribulations. Here's how you can rejoice. "Inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy." I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. When Peter talks about exceeding joy, it is the phrase to jump for joy. Peter says you should be jumping for joy. Why and how can I jump for joy in the midst of what I'm going through? Peter says because you are partakers in the same suffering that Christ went through. But just as Christ went through the suffering and was glorified, the reason we can rejoice now is not necessarily because of the situation that we're in right now, because he wants us to understand right now is just temporary. He says, but when Jesus comes in all of his glory, we will jump for joy. He says the sufferings that we go through right now, Paul says on one occasion, the sufferings that we go through right now cannot even be compared to the glory and the joy that we'll have after a while. And so Peter says, you have to learn how to rejoice. It's amazing that joy, when the Bible talks of joy, it has nothing to do with our circumstances nor our situations, because truly joy is an inside job. You can have joy in the midst of everything that is going on, but your joy comes because you have the right connection with God. Then in verse 14, he says, if you're reproached for the name of Christ, happy are you. There it is again. He's given this theme of joy. He says, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. Now, I'll explain this and then I'll be finished, because I want to give you some hope during this time of turmoil. I want to give you some hope during this time of stressing and straining. He says the reason you can rejoice is because you are a partner, you are a partaker, just as Jesus clothed himself in humanity and suffered, we too suffer, so we become partakers in his suffering. And if we are partakers in his suffering, we will also be partakers in his glory. And then he talks about the glory of God coming upon you. He pulls from this Old Testament theology of the Shekinah glory, where the Spirit of God would hover in the tabernacle of God, and it would tell God's people that the presence of God is in this place. But now, not in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, we are the tabernacle of God. Our bodies are the temple of God. And so Peter uses this and says, just as the Spirit of God hovered over the tabernacle in the old, it now hovers over us in the new. And when we understand that we have the presence of God in our lives, then we do not render evil for evil. One of the most difficult things for us to understand is the Bible says, love your enemies. It is difficult to love your enemies. But when we employ, and you say, how can I love my enemy? How can I have joy in the midst of chaos and calamities? In your own strength, it's not possible. But in the strength and the power of God, it is absolutely possible. I pray that I've given you some words of encouragement today. Stay strong, stay focused, and always hold to God's unchanging hand. May God bless you on this day, and may he bless you extremely well.
Reverend Watkins, thank you for that devotional. I watched it last night. Make sure I listened to the full devotion and could hear all the words. And for me personally, drawing the lesson, and because it's such powerful advice when when we're suffering, how to find joy in suffering. And by building a connection with God, and again, respecting all faiths, all ways, but how do we find joy and find our way to connect to God, to even in the midst of suffering? So that's a powerful message, Reverend Watkins. Thank you for bringing us that message this morning. And now we're also going to shift. Typically at a Transform Westside Summit, we're able to do self-introductions, because part of building a community is getting to know one another. And the way you get to know one another is to say your name and introduce yourself to your neighbor. And we do that at our Transform Summits. One of our best parts is we go around the room, hundreds of people, and everyone says their name and get to know each other. Because I've often reflected, if you're building a new community together, if you don't know each other, hard to do. So we're doing a lot, Brock, because we want to get to know. And I forgot to mention you were here this morning on my talking points, but Craig Lucy is here again. Thank you, Craig.
Yes, thanks for having me. We got people tuning in right now on YouTube, on Facebook and Twitter. If you want me to shout out a few names,
I do.
Just Carla Joe, Aretha Asbury, and we have Liana Barr Davenport, Winnie Tabrone, and Carol Tucker Burden. And I see some familiar faces out there right now. So thank you all so much, and thank you to our panel for being with us on this Juneteenth morning.
Yeah, and I thank you, and I recognize some of those names. Liana Barr Davenport, thank you for joining this morning. Thank you for the work that you do, leading your organization. So thank all of y'all to tuning in this morning. And so now I'm going to bring us viewers to our panel this morning. And panelists, I want to thank you. And the full bio, again, for our very distinguished panelists is in our bulletin. And now I'm going to put this bulletin down. But what we're going to be doing this morning is having a really important conversation. How to build community, about how to choose community over chaos. And so the panelists this morning, I'm very lucky that the panelists agreed to do this broadcast this morning because it's very early, and also appreciating we're in the middle of a healthcare crisis too, so we can see we're practicing our social distancing, and we want to make sure we're keeping people safe, wearing masks, et cetera. So we want to thank our panelists before, and we have 3 panelists, and what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to be asking each of our panelists questions about how we build the beloved community. Back to Dr. King, how do we choose chaos over community? How do we choose community over chaos? And I've had the opportunity to interact with each of the panelists. So what we're going to do this morning, I'm going to ask each panelist a question, and we're anticipating taking about 15 minutes in the first segment. And then we have a pre-recorded interview. We wanted to interview some of the folks that participate in our Transform Live Summits. So we then have a pre-recorded interview that's about 5 minutes. We'll come back to this, do another about 15 minutes of me asking questions. We'll go to one other pre-recorded video that's about 5 minutes, come back here for another 15 minutes. Then we're going to go around 8:30, we're going to go live to Craig taking questions from the audience. And we'll do that for about 15 minutes, so the questions can be directed to any of us. And around 8:45 then, we'll begin to, we should be done with this part, and then we'll move to our show close. So that's how we're going to do this morning. And to begin our questions, I'm lucky that I love asking questions, right? Y'all know I love asking questions. And I want to thank each of you for being here. And so Dr. Thomas is the president of Morehouse College. Thank you. Makeda lives in Vine City, been in Vine City for over 30 years, and she leads a not-for-profit. And she's out there working hard. We're going to talk about that. Thank you for being here, Makeda. And Reverend Winston Taylor, you can see he has his shirts on this morning. We're going to talk about this Winston. He owns St. Mark's on English Avenue. He also owns a building off of Martin Luther King Drive, 960 Martin Luther King Drive, right? So thank you, Pastor, for being here this morning. And I can tell you, these are all people I have learned from while I have been president and CEO of the Westside Future Fund. So I'm going to begin my questions with the president of Morehouse College. Dr. Thomas, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
And I remember I was invited to a welcoming reception that Curly Dossman held for you at the president's home. And I remember something you said that was just so extraordinary to me, because you talked in your remarks that Dr. King wasn't obviously brilliant at the time he was at Morehouse College. I think and you said so we have to treat every.
He was a C student.
He was a C student, because you said we have to treat every man that they could be that man, because the world needs more. And so my question right now, with so much understandable anger, especially of young black men, that you're leading, and I know you take your responsibilities from a sacred duty, that the men of Morehouse College who are angry, upset, so much injustice has just laid itself bare. What do you say to these young men?
I say to these young men, to the men of Morehouse, that you are made for this time. You are made for this time. That Morehouse College was born out of the ashes of slavery, survived the assault of Jim Crow, brought into the world the post Jim Crow era that led to voting rights, and that we've been on that long journey. And as Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And it doesn't bend by itself. And that in this moment, we're part of bending that arc toward justice. And some of my students, after one of our students was in the incident here in Atlanta where he was tased along with a Spelman student. They were in a car dragged out of the car by the police, and our students led a march. And I talked to them before the march and said, you're men of Morehouse. You know what the values are. It's about nonviolent protest and advocacy, and using all the tools that the generations before you have brought to you: nonviolent advocacy and protest, and the right to vote, and those things. But you're born for this moment. And I also tell them, don't let yourself be a victim of the destructive elements in this for you to be self-destructive. And that's what I talk to them about.
Thank you, Dr. Tom, for sharing those words. Those are powerful. So I want to turn to Sister Makeda. And what I appreciate about you, Makeda, is when I think it was 2016 we started the land use framework planning work, and then you wrote an essay that was so powerful. And I think it was the first time I had read the frame the way you put it, and it was in the historic Westside News, and it was, building the beloved community. Those were your words. Building the beloved community, the alternative to gentrification. And you talked about that, and in this time of pain, Makeda, because I know that we have the healthcare crisis you were leaning into through Sisters Action League, in Vine City. So how do we build community right now? How do we do that, Makeda? Because it doesn't seems like, tell us, how do we build that community in this time it seems so much chaos?
Well, we have to understand evolution. And Dr. King often referred to disruption, and he talked about what we're seeing today, and that is the frustration of a generation that received that non-sufficient fund check that he refers to when he talks about the two Americas. I see this as an opportunity, maybe, and I've been very emotional over the last couple of weeks, because sometimes God has to shake us up. And I did another presentation at Westside Future Fund, and I saw it use a proverb that's African that says, fire on the mountain. Well, there's been fire on the mountain for a long time. But God, in his great wisdom, stopped the whole world for a moment. And we call it a pandemic. I call it a pause moment, where God has shut everything down. We had to be home. We had an opportunity to do introspection. So what we're witnessing is the evolution of the movement. And what King also says is that the movement at this point, and as you read Community or Chaos, it's a mental transformation. It's addressing the three evils: racism, economic oppression, and militarism. So we must be calm and know that it's challenges that bring people together. Even if we go back to the book of Nehemiah, that was opposition. He went into a situation of opposition. But instead of despairing, he sought out from among the people what skills did they have. How could they use those skills to rebuild? So in the midst of this confusion, and it is confusion, it's painful confusion to see people being lynched in different ways today. I'm grateful for our young people. I want them to stay safe. I want them to vocalize their rights of expression, to wear their masks, and not destroy the community. Don't be a part of chaos, but be a part of solution.
Thank you for those powerful words. I'm going to turn now, because I appreciate the point you made about the mindset change. And I'm going to turn to the pastor who I learned in my journey, studied under Reverend Cameron Alexander. Is that right, Pastor? And I first met Pastor because he owns a beautiful former church in English Avenue, St. Mark's. And you bought that church, I learned, in the late 90s, right, from the AME church?
Yes, sir.
You told me a story. You literally slept outside the door to see the bishop
Yes,
to
sir.
try to buy that church,
Yes,
because
sir.
you wanted that church.
Yes, sir.
And at the time you bought the church, there was a lot of chaos in English Avenue, a fair way to say it?
Yes, sir.
And you then been ministering in that corner for over 20 years.
Yes, sir.
Why?
Necessity. When we look at our communities and especially the African American community, that was a need, that was a necessity to be addressed. At that particular time, I also grew up in Old Fourth Ward, and at that particular time, a lot of gentrification was being done in Old Fourth Ward in the 90s, 95. But in that particular year over there, there was a call that went out saying that there was an issue with being able to do Meals on Wheels for the seniors, and they needed volunteers in that particular area. And so I volunteered, excuse me, to go over to deliver the Meals on Wheels. And while delivering Meals on Wheels, I noticed the old church building, the roof had caved in on it, and there were drugs being done on it, prostitution on it, and everything like that. And it was a necessity, if we were going to have a better community, or a whole community, a healthy, sustainable community, that something had to be done about that. It had to be addressed. And so God placed it in my heart to address that and fix that particular issue.
Well, that's very powerful. And I know you've been talking to people who walk by that church a long time, right? And seeing them all kinds of things.
Yes, sir.
What do you tell those folks?
Let's build our community. You know, when you know, we can blame a lot of things on a lot of people, but the bottom line of everything is ownership, personal ownership. And so, you know, to take personal ownership of cleaning our neighborhood, to take personal ownership of building our stores in the community, opening our stores in the community, take personal ownership to become entrepreneurs, to fix up our houses and to take ownership of these things, is a necessity. It is a necessity in the beloved community. If you want a healthy, sustainable community, you have to take ownership.
Take ownership. Well, that's a great segue, y'all, because I thought we'd now cut to our first pre-recorded interview about someone who's taken ownership, a parent avenger. So if y'all, and one of the things we want to do is to give voice to those that can't be here with us that attend our Transform Westside Summits, so that both of the pre-recorded interviews are with folks who have been coming to the Transform Westside Summit. So let's roll to that first pre-recorded interview.
All right, this is Benjamin Early with Westside Future Fund. I'm joined by the lovely mom and super Avenger member, Miss Waukesha. How you doing?
I am doing good. Now you're gonna hear my kids in the background, so don't bother. Let's keep going.
If you had to summarize how you feel right now in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
So I'm disappointed. And I'm kind of happy that things are finally coming to the forefront. And last, I'm ready. I'm ready to join forces with everybody else to make sure that Atlanta is the city that everybody wanted to be. I mean that I'm happy that a lot of stuff is finally coming to the forefront. We know race have always been an issue here in Atlanta. And we know that Black and brown people, poor people have always suffered. And so a lot of things are starting to come to the forefront, especially how we are viewed and treated by others.
What are some things that you see happening specifically on the West Side that you would say are contributing to being part of the solution for these injustices that we see taking place?
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. So when COVID first happened, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, when COVID first happened, me and my good friend Sherry, we started a parent group, Atlanta Parent Buddy. And right now we have about 55 parents. And so what we did was we made sure we connect them with resources for, you know, all of school stuff. So getting internet, getting laptops, getting into the classroom, using Class Dojo. Then we went a step further in finding resources to help pay the light bill, help pay the rent. And then now we went an extra step forward, and we're helping parents become business owners. I myself is a small business owner, and we helped about 7 to 8 parents get their LLC, and they are becoming business owners because they got laid off, right? And so a lot of them didn't get their unemployment. Can you believe people still don't have their unemployment? So we're like, we got to rethink how we do things. And so what we did was say, hey, what are you good at? And let's turn it into a business. And that's what we're doing right now.
How would you define community in the sense of where we need to get to? What's the goal for you? What would the community, the beloved community that we're all striving for, what does that look like to you?
So when I think about the beloved community and I think about Dr. King, I think about what he was doing before he passed away. You know, he was trying to connect the community with resources. Like still to this day, we just need resources. We're not asking for nobody to give us a handout. We just want to be supportive. And we just want the resources that's needed for our community. And so I think the beloved community, it's a community where everybody come together and, you know, we live together and we have those conversations about black, white, green, blue. And we can talk about the past and we can talk about the future, but we cannot move forward until we address what's been happening all these years. Like, I'm sorry, the children today is not going to, I don't see them letting this go. Like, I think we spent a lot of years just, you know, saying, oh, this happened, we're going to pray about it, we're going to move forward. But I think the youth today is like, we want some answers and we want it now because we do want to live different from our ancestors or our grandparents or even our parents. That's my little one.
Well, I completely agree with you. And I think sometimes what gets lost in the sauce in terms of Martin Luther King and all of the things that he stood for is some people often focus more so on the method of nonviolence without realizing that it was a method to a certain end. And it wasn't just practicing and preaching nonviolence for the sake of being nonviolent. It was because this was the mechanism by which we will achieve economic equity and equality for Black people and other people of color. So I 100% agree with your point, and I appreciate you mentioning that.
We are in a great spot right now where we can actually move forward together and we can address some of the issues that has been plaguing this country for a long time.
All right, thank you, Waukesha and Benjamin, for that great interview. And Waukesha, parent Avenger, she also mentioned her friend Cher. They're fighting hard for their schools in the Booker T. Washington cluster. So thank you. And I love the point about resources. And Dr. Thomas, come back to you when she talked about we just need resources, just not a handout. And it's expensive, I know, to educate men the right way at Morehouse College. But folks might not know, and I want you to say, you got a pretty spectacular resource gift recently. Yeah. And I want you to maybe talk about that and also tell people why you think it happened. Like what?
Okay, well, what John's referring to is yesterday it was announced that Morehouse received a $40 million gift for scholarships to ensure that some of the young men who come to Morehouse who are from families with low incomes, but young men who've performed extraordinarily well in high school can come to Morehouse, get a 4-year education, and leave debt-free, which means leaving liberated. Because if you start your life with $30,000 or $40,000 worth of debt, it can overwhelm your ability to create wealth and to make the choices that allow you to follow your passions. The gift came from Reed Hastings and his wife, Patty Quillen. Reed Hastings is the founder of Netflix. He's also been a philanthropist in education, and he came here 2 years ago visited with our students, had never been to an HBCU before, but had heard about Morehouse. And he was so taken by what he saw and his interactions with our students that he gave us a 7-figure gift. He left and said, I'll give you $1 million. And he gave us another gift of $1 million. And then as the country slid into this moment, I love Sister Johnson's description that this is a pause moment. It's a pause created by the collision of two viruses, the COVID virus and the virus of racism, both of which are global pandemics and epidemic in our country. And as Reed and his wife Patty were looking at what's happening in this moment, they started to think about what could they do that might be catalytic, meaning it wouldn't just benefit Morehouse, but it would send a signal to the world about how people like Reed, who's white, and a billionaire, need to think about deploying their resources if they're really serious about investing in solutions to the issues that still plague our country in terms of inequities. And the way he describes it is we suffer from social isolation because different communities separate from each other. But we live in a capitalist society and we suffer from capital isolation. Most of the capital is in the hands of the white community. And they're very philanthropic, but mostly toward the white community. And if we're really going to get underneath some of the structural aspects of what plagues us, people like him have to reverse that and invest in places that are creating the solution to some of our problems at the level that they invest in institutions in the white community. That's what he said was behind it. And he saw what he did, and he gave $40 million to Morehouse, $40 million to Spelman, and $40 million to the United Negro College Fund, UNCF. And what he's hoping is that that will inspire other people who talk the talk of social justice to actually invest in the institutions that have been working that issue and making a difference in it, in Morehouse's case, for 153 years. We don't need new organizations. We need organizations that can scale. That's what he's trying to do.
And I think what's a really important point for understand is my youngest daughter right now, she's at University of Georgia, and thanks to former Governor Zell Miller, she has a Zell Miller scholarship, so I don't pay, as her father, I don't pay her tuition, and she goes to a state school, so her fees, but that's not true for Morehouse College. I don't think folks always understand the Zell Miller scholarship doesn't work the same way for your, because folks understand the math a little bit.
Yeah, the Zell Miller scholarship is only if you go to one of the state colleges.
That's right.
A student who qualifies for a Zell Miller scholarship who wants to go to Morehouse doesn't benefit from it.
So back to freedom from oppression. That's a pretty powerful statement about not, because my daughters, I thought as a father, one of the things I want to do for my daughters is when you finish college, no debt, and buy your first car, then from there, but some of us don't appreciate how hard it is for others to have that gift.
That's right. And it's interesting you mentioned that because I'm a business school professor by training, and there's actually data that shows that the long-term effect of leaving college with no debt and a car is a multiplier on the wealth that you will build by the time you are 50 years old versus a student who leaves with the average debt and no car, literally, right? And that's why I call the effect of the gift that we got for the students that will benefit from it a liberation gift. Same thing is true. We had Robert Smith come last year at our commencement and announce that he would relieve the student loan debt for our entire class, 404 young men. And just to show you what that debt burden was, because we just finished paying off the gift, $34 million.
Wow. Well, that's powerful. And also what I love about the win-win of it, because that means those young men can get to right work. They want to do what everyone wants to do, contribute to society, be wage earners, pay their taxes, build a better future. We talk about a lot, don't we, Makeda, in Vine City, about resources. And you've been talking about that for a long time. What kind of resources does Vine City need? What's to help people in Vine City build better lives?
Thomas said is that there are always organizations. We have Sisters Action Team started as a sisters collective in 1997. We've been working, and in fact, Morehouse was our program evaluator from 2002 to about 2010. So, but when people come in, they overlook what exists. And the people that exist have the relational capacity to be impactful. So they want to come in and pour money into the West Side and bring external institutions in. And that was not the vision we had. The vision we had is that a larger organization would grab the hand of a smaller organization like Sisters Action Team or Greater Vine City Opportunity Program, people who just were following their mission that was ordained for them to do, but didn't necessarily have the skills to build a full-scale organization, or maybe not the desire, because they're mission-focused. So I think what we need to do is acknowledge, and this is what our young people are saying, we're here. We wasn't nowhere. How you think the community survived when it went throughout this investment? Because we were here. Invest in what's here, add to, and we will grow.
And one thing you did that was so powerful, the Westside Future Fund is an outside organization. Let's just acknowledge that, right?
Yes.
Came into the community. I'm from the city, but I'm not from the, and you, and I've never shared this with you, but I think I maybe, but you, at one of our summits talked about paternalism.
Yes.
And it really struck me because I recognized that to my children, I'm their father. I will always be paternalistic. It is baked. I'm their father. I realized there is no way for me not to be paternalistic here, because that's back to the authenticity, right? And because it was right is to say, but also I just wanted to own it. It's like but I want to help. But back to respecting organizations are here, because it really said to me, wow, you're not seeing what you just said. It was a real eye-opener for me. I want to thank you for that.
And King said that as well. So especially in community or chaos.
And I want to come to the pastor here, because you and I have talked a lot about that. What's already here and not seen. So what else is here and not seen that we should be investing in, Pastor?
So I agree with everything that everyone has said. But I'm an outsider. As an investor, and I am an outsider. I don't live in Vine City or the West Side. I grew up on the East Side. I bought St. Mark, I bought 960, but I did those things as an investor. You know, so I am an outsider. And the things that motivated me was, I said, what is this going to take to make this community healthy and sustainable? So I came in with a different perspective than others did, you know, because as an architect, I have a formal trade as an architect. You can look at a community and say, okay, what makes this community healthy and sustainable? And so my participation has been, how do I help that community become healthy and sustainable? And so, you know, I look at the things of necessity, piece by piece, in terms of making a healthy, sustainable community. The buying the church, the cleaning the neighborhood up, working with DCP to get trash cans in the community, so we can look at, as Tim King likes to say, the low-hanging fruit of change in a community. But when you look at what makes a community healthy and sustainable, all of us can contribute. I don't care where you're from or who you are, you can contribute to making, and so my thing is, all of these things are necessary. The famous architect James Ross said, we have to do all of these things simultaneously. One does not take prominence over the other thing. We have to be doing all of them at the same time if we want to rebuild our community, if we want to rebuild the beloved community.
And that's right. And since none of us can do everything, some of us, that's why we all got to work together, right?
Yes, sir.
And you also formed a not-for-profit, has an interesting name, Beloved Community, Inc.
Yes.
What's that about?
Again, if we're going to rebuild, we have to do it together. We can do more together than we can as individuals. And that was one of the biggest things that King fought against, is how our society works individually and not together in building the beloved community. And so when we come alongside of each other, when we come together, when you look at Nehemiah, as Sister Makeda talked about, or Westside Future Fund always lifts up Nehemiah, how they came together to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem in the short time that they did. We can do more together than we can as individuals. And so it is necessary for us to be able to come together. I am one who is a firm believer, and the reason I took special interest when you invited me to be on this panel was to be able to have these conversations, because we like to have the conversation saying, oh, everybody's got a perspective. You can't all have a perspective if you're going to come together and do something singular.
So it is necessary to come together.
It's necessary to come together.
It's necessary to come together to listen to one another. Necessary to come together to make sure we hear each other.
Necessary to have the same mindset. When they were building that wall together, they could not have different mindsets. They had to have a singular mindset to build that wall. So often we can have different perspectives on things, but when it comes to building, we have to be singular in mindset if we're going to accomplish that, because of the way we have to work together, the hammer stroking, the similarities of how you're working together in construction and building.
What I appreciate that, and back to my own acknowledgement about paternalism, is it's hard to change mine. It's hard for me to change my mindset. And I don't always see it, but what I appreciate about both of y'all and others is that you coach me. That as I try to change my mindset and see what I don't see, you also are forgiving of me and my mistakes, Westside Future Fund's mistakes or missteps. So I want to say, thank you for that and helping that. And we're going to now go to our second pre-recorded interview, and it was from someone else who's been coming to our summits, Pastor Charles Merriweather, who's been a regular attendee. And so we're going to cut to that pre-recorded interview again with Benjamin Early doing the pre-recorded interview. So let's just cut to that, please.
This is Benjamin Early with Westside Future Fund. I'm here with Mr. Charles Merriweather. Mr. Merriweather, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Benjamin. How are you?
I'm doing all right. If you would, just tell the people a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background.
Well, I started attending the Westside Summit meetings on behalf of Goodwill Industries of North Georgia. I'm a board member, and our mission at Goodwill is to put people to work. We put over 24,000 people to work in 2019 and shooting for 25,000 people to work in 2020. And we have ABCs at Goodwill: a job, a better job, and a career. And that's one of my main purposes for being on the West Side, is to promote the opportunity for the West Side for Goodwill to participate on the West Side with the good folks of the West Side.
In regard to everything that we're experiencing right now as a city and as a country, we're still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing, social movements take place all around the country regarding systemic racism and police brutality. If you had 3 words to summarize how you feel at this historic moment, what would those 3 words be?
I think Benjamin, I think it would be disappointed, heartbroken, and hijacked. I'm very disappointed with the activities in our city, because I think that there are outside people who've come in and taken away a purpose that the folks had in protesting, and I understand their feelings. I'm heartbroken that we are not communicating better and that it happened. And I think that the sincerity of the protest was hijacked, as I said earlier, by outside parties. These the activities, some of the activities in Atlanta on the Memorial Day weekend were not true Atlanta people. There was a motive beyond protest, and they took advantage of us, and that's why I use the word hijacked.
So as a regular Transform Westside Summit attendee, what do you see that are some things happening on the West Side specifically of Atlanta that might serve as part of the solution to a lot of the issues that we're facing right now?
I think the West Side Future Fund has done an excellent job of creating an infrastructure which can help carry us forward and even expand it more than the boundaries of the current West Side area that is defined. John and the team have done a great job, and as other parties wish to provide additional funding, we have the, again, infrastructure to carry it all across the West Side, not just to the existing area we're servicing.
Gotcha. So given that this week's theme is choosing chaos or community, how do you think we can collectively avoid the chaos that could arise from this pivotal moment in history where we're in?
We have to know each other better. We have to be friends, and we have to respect each other.
Final question for you. As we look to bring to fruition this beloved community that Dr. King dreamt about and spoke about so eloquently, as a Caucasian male in America, what value do you find in helping to create a level socioeconomic playing field for African Americans and other people of color?
Well, my feeling is that we're all Americans. We're all in this together, and we need to help one another. And as I just mentioned, respect each other. I think it's critical that we know each other, that we be friends. Friends don't treat friends in bad ways. And there's a gulf there, and I think the West Side Future Fund is working to reduce that gulf and provide an opportunity for communications across all of Atlanta.
All right, thank you for that interview, and Charles Benner, thank you. And I love his ending is that we got to be friends. And what I found in my own journey with the Transform Westside Summits, it's hard to be with friends with people you don't know. And so getting to know people, especially people that have had different experiences, and being, building friendships. And I want to come back to the young people, the protests, because you're much more of a King's Call than I am. But I'm pretty sure he wouldn't tell them to stop protesting, would be my guess. But he might, as he encourages them to protest. Because one of the things that I've really helped me with Dr. King, when he talked about love thy neighbor, you want to say, because I always found it remarkable, how did he love someone that beat him and threw him in jail? How did that? And he said, doesn't mean that's different than a friendship. The agape love is different. Doesn't mean I got to like Bull Connor, but I do got to love him. And he talked about that difference. And so how do you think, or would you encourage, do you think in terms of encouraging the protest, do you see keep on keeping on them? But what advice do you give them when they go do those protests?
The advice I give them is go. protests. The thing I love about what's happening is these young people are saying, you know, we can be on Twitter and social media, but it really is about putting your body on the line, right? And that's the difference. These young people have decided to put their body on the line. They're out there. And the moral hazard in these protests is that you can lose your humanity. That's what happens when the protest turns violent. When the anger becomes hate, you lose your humanity. And I talk to them about, you know, don't lose your humanity, right? There are destructive forces out there that have driven you to do this. That's the dehumanization that these young people, these young black people have experienced. But in that are also the forces to have you become self-destructive. And don't fall prey to that. And to do that, you have to maintain your humanity, and you have to see the humanity in others. And for me, we talk about King, this in the sort of love your enemy. But the way I think about it is, it's about don't lose your ability to see the humanity in everyone. Don't lose your ability to see the humanity in everyone, even someone who has a mindset that's about your dehumanization. Don't respond to that in a way that says, and so they are less human than I am. Their humanity, their capacity for humanity is less than mine. 'Cause once you do that, the actual difference between you and them is close to zero, because they've dehumanized you and you dehumanize them in response. You actually destroy your own humanity, right? And so if I just say to my students, whatever you do, don't lose your humanity, I don't have to tell them what to do, right? I just tell them the principle. Don't lose your humanity. Don't come back here and have yourself feel less human when you watch on TV what you did. I came of age in the late 60s, and I watched from my front yard young people burn down our community, and then look in the rearview mirror and realize they had burnt down their own community and they had lost their humanity. And that's what I say to my students.
That's powerful advice, and I want to come to you, Makeda, because one thing I appreciate about you and Certain Sectors Action League, you work with women, I want you to talk about a little bit, who may not see their own humanity in themselves.
Well,
talk about what you do with women on the West Side as part of Sisters Action League.
Well, Sisters Action Team, our tagline says it's all, and that's working together, transforming ourselves, our families, and our communities in that order. The woman is the key point to all of this, because she nurtures and raises the next generation. She can help with the shaping of a newborn child, even from nutrition, while she's carrying that child. I think one of the things you said is love thy neighbor as thyself. And that troubled me also, as I'm also an ordained minister that few people know, but it drove me, because first you got to do what? Love yourself. And if I love myself, then I have to work on myself and see my own flaws, because I got to take it out of my eye before I can take it out of yours. So if I have compassion for me and my errors, I have to have compassion for you. But I think one of the things that we tell to women is go back, press pause on your life right now. Go back to where you were when you were in elementary school. Go back as far as you can about what you thought you wanted to be before you became contaminated by reality. Set new visions. We have sisters that have been working with us for years, Dr. Jessica Blaylock. We discover yourself, rediscover yourself. But I often say I've lived many lifetimes, because just like the body regenerates itself every 7 years, we have a mind shift if we're growing. So you may do something that I don't like. It's my obligation to say to you, I don't like what you did. Not to say that I don't like you. I don't like the behavior. And I think I'm going to digress a little bit, because I have to say the elephant in the room. Somebody got to say it. What we're seeing is the browning of America. And what we're seeing is the fear of others who feel that as America browns, that inhumanity will return what was administered. And so I have to see that with a level of compassion and understanding. That there are people that, yes, have hijacked this movement because they want to start something different. They want to start a race war. They might want genocide. They might want a lot of things. But what we're seeing is the awakening of everyone who knows that 99% of us, black, white, brown, yellow, are under economic oppression that Dr. King talked about. So let us not try to be politically correct and not speak truth to power. Our young people are doing what I did when I was 11, 12, 13, 14. I grew up across the street from CORE, Congress on Racial Equality. I was in their youth program. So I was touched. I was once an outsider too in Vine City. I wasn't born and raised here. My roots stem from Augusta, Georgia. But I came here, I started working with a community-based organization that was Greater Vine City Opportunity Program, and I did what my brother John did. I said, if I'm spending this much time over here, I might as well live. And as I lived, I met another profound Morehouse man, Benjamin E. Mays. And he had that poem that they used to say over at the Apex. They had his picture, and you press the button, and he says, there's no great tragedy not to reach the goal, but there's a great tragedy not to have a goal to reach. So our goal is to reach the beloved community. My mission is to empower the women who will assist in building that community.
I think that's powerful about empowerment. And I want to come to the last question I'm going to do, then we're going to go to live questions. So folks that are watching, you want to ask a question, when we finish the next question with the pastor, we're going to go to live questions from our viewers. But you and I have talked about this, and back to economic oppression, because it's something I know, Pastor, you feel strongly about. So talk about how you're using your vision of using the assets, St. Mark's in your building. Talk about your vision for freeing from economic oppression.
So again, if you're talking about a healthy, sustainable community or chaos over community, what is necessary for people to be healthy? What is necessary in all of this freedom and liberation when you hear the show talking about, the guys talking about economic equality, this, that, and that? There's some real issues around economics, even when you've had Family First on here, that a healthy family is directly equated to financial and economics. So, we really have to address that, and we don't want to address that. That is a huge problem. For me, when Makeda talked about the elephant in the room, that is the elephant in the room. whether you're talking about a Morehouse University that gets funding from different organizations, or Westside Future Fund, or the NBA, the NFL, there's no liberation because people aren't free. Owning your own business is freedom. You cannot have freedom without owning your own. People can give you things, people can donate things to you, that can be all kind of charity. But if you don't own for yourself, there's no freedom. LeBron James was just able to talk about the woman, the reporter that told him to shut up and dribble. As much money as he has, he's still not free. I think there's a quote out there on the front wall that talks about that. King talks about that when he says, you know, in fact, I have it here. Let me read it right quick if you don't mind. He says, the richer we have become materially, the poor we have become morally and spiritually. We have learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned the simple art of living together as brothers. When you got this less ownership, that speaks very specifically to not being brothers. That's a servitude. That's not a brother. That's a servitude. And we've got to come out of the servitude state in this country. Again, whether you're NFL, you know, you got we got athletes that based on contracts, they can't do this or they can't do that. And so LeBron was not even able to speak to the reporter, but based on now in what's taking place and what these young people are doing in the burning and all this type of stuff, he felt liberated to speak about what the reporter spoke to him. So again, economic freedom, and that's what King spoke about. Economic freedom is freedom.
So, and we're going to go to the live question, but I want to reflect, because you said you got to own it to be free. I mean, to me, owning your own home.
Yes.
Owning your mind and not be in debt. I mean, that ownership of intellectual capital.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I think that's what you were reflecting on when you say if you leave college with no debt, but you own your mind and your intellectual capital to go, you know, you talked about an ownership too of empowerment. So there's no freedom if you don't own it.
You don't own it. Yes, sir.
That's a lot to think about. So, while I'm thinking about that, we're going to take some live questions. We're going to take some live questions now from the audience. So thank you, Craig, what Craig does is take live questions right from the live stream. I don't see him, he sees them, and he'll direct them to the appropriate panelists.
Yep, and we have folks tuning in right now on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and everybody has a lot to think about, as you mentioned, John. Right now, Sherry Balil says, yes, becoming an entrepreneur is freedom, a sense of pride. Also, Valerie Williams, who always tunes in as well, says, own or be owned. More quotes that we have from Valerie Williams: vote, vote, vote. Sherry Balil says, this is a total reset of America. Sherry Balil also says, I want every parent of the Booker T. Washington cluster to become entrepreneurs so that they can have a sense of pride and just live well. Now for some questions, we've touched up on some of these, but maybe we can elaborate even more. Rod Batiste, Reverend Taylor, you might be able to touch up on this a bit more. And same with Makeda. What are a few ways that small nonprofits and community-based organizations can really come together to make an even larger impact?
Well, we're actually doing it in Vine City. We have a collaborative that was formed, and it's called the English Avenue Vine City Collaborative. And this is a collective response to the pandemic in the community. Sisters Action Team began with the support of Westside Future Fund to distribute care kits early when the pandemic started. And the kits consist of masks, gloves, hand sanitizers, and wipes. Then we noticed that a lot of food was being given out, but they weren't addressing the need in this pandemic to improve your immune system. And so we began to say, okay, we need to get more fruits and vegetables. And once again, I talked to my brother, John, and I was sharing to him our concern. And the Historic Westside Gardens, who I shared with them our concern. And a collective, a group of us came together and said, well, we'll have 4 locations that will be community driven, where we'll make sure that people get some nutrition along with the other foods that are being given. Since then, the distribution of good produce has increased. So it shows that some of our partners are listening. So what it is that we have to stop being consumed in the need to be the one or to be right, and be focused on the service or the task at hand. And I am because we are is an African proverb. All organizations, churches, nonprofits, and they did it before. We've done it before. We have to come together and not focus on our own individual weakness nor our egos, and service God's people. To me, it's as simple as that.
And I totally agree. In the 40s, 60s, whenever you look at healthy, sustainable communities, sustainable communities, public, private, all of the components come together and work together. That's what one of the models that we talk about as the beloved community, not what we can do as individuals, what we can all do together. You know, we particularly work with Westside Future Fund. We particularly work with DCP. We look to partner with as many people and many organizations as we can, because that's where the ability to accomplish and overcome things are, not in our single organizations, but coming together. And I think so. I think we fell away from that, which has allowed our community to become chaotic. Is that we have not worked together to overcome the obstacles that are in front of us, you know, to be able to work with Morehouse. Even in this situation right here, you know, the relationship of Morehouse now with the community now has moved closer. I mean, you know, nobody may not want to say it, you know, but it's the truth. I mean, the churches, the work of the churches, I mean, because we have all become divided. And we have to be honest about that. This is not just a black-white problem. This is an everybody problem. This ain't just black issue or white issue where we trying to make this fine line. It was a combination of all of us doing something that we shouldn't have left. Not only did whites leave the community, blacks left the West Side as well. We moved to the suburbs too. We abandoned our community too. So let's take ownership. And I think that's the thing, that if we're going to really look at King's teachings, King just didn't point to the white guy. I mean, he talked to the church, he talked to everybody. This is an everybody problem, and everybody is part of the solution.
The good news is we can be all part of the solution.
Yes, sir. We have to be.
And the good news is we can learn from each other. And I know I've learned from both of you and so many others. Dr. Thomas, you know, my board chair, I'm always learning. So thank you for that. What's our next question?
The good news is we're sitting here in this wonderful venue, the King Chapel, having this conversation.
Yes.
And for Professor Thomas, thank you so much for allowing us to be here on this Juneteenth morning to have this discussion. And I'll say, as I'm taking in these comments and questions, people love that quote, "Don't lose your humanity." And Sherry Belial chimed in and said, and Professor Thomas, you can take this question, racial healing is needed. What are safe ways to start racial healing within our community?
What are safe ways? I don't know. I mean, if safe means doing it in ways where you don't take risk, then I think it's not possible. Racial healing will require us to be vulnerable. And it will require us to talk about the ways in which us, meaning everybody, blacks and whites, to talk about, you know, the ways in which our current racial situation has put our humanity in jeopardy. And it'll require us to struggle with the fear and the anger that is there. To be, to be vulnerable. And I don't know about other people, but, for me, feeling vulnerable is not when I feel safe.
Yes.
Now, that may be something I learned from the playground in the inner city where I grew up, but, right? So doing it in a safe way, I don't know if that's the right search or paradigm.
Yes.
But I think it is about opening up, being vulnerable, being honest. It's also about creating relationships yeah, I'll just stop there.
Fair enough.
Well, I want to
Mamie
say,
Moore has a
real quick, because I want to, one thing I appreciate, I want to say thank you, the panelists, because for me, a safe place is to be able to confess my stupidity, right? To me, a safe place is to confess, I don't know. To me, a safe place is to say, I didn't realize how offensive I was. So that to your point, the safety becomes that when I confess, that, because the shame of confessing that back to a safe place is knowing once I say that we're still going to be together, because it's sometimes hard to acknowledge inner truths.
See, the way I think about it is, what you're talking about is, I think, I hear that, I say, what you're really saying is, when you're in a safe place, you can do that. Not you're safe when you're doing that.
Right.
Right?
That's what I'm saying.
That's what he's saying.
So we need to create a safe place where we can do that. And to the Reverend's point, and Sister Johnson's point, that's what community is about.
Yes, sir.
Community creates a safe place for me to be vulnerable.
Yes.
But I'm not, right? As opposed to, it's safe for me to be vulnerable. Like I feel safe when I'm being, no. I'm able to be vulnerable because I'm in a safe place. And that's very different than, I still feel the risk, but I take the risk because I'm in a safe place.
Yes.
And I think it starts with us all being committed to creating community. I don't even think I start with the paradigm of it's about racial healing.
Community.
It's about community, and if we're going to create community, then racial healing becomes a part of that, because that's necessary for us to create community.
Yes, sir.
You have something to say?
Yes, I do. When do I not? But in any event, when I look at, and this is, you look at the word community, in the middle of it you have unity. So we have to come together in unity. And there's something called oppositional unity. And that means we don't necessarily have to agree on everything. We just have to agree on one thing. We want to live. And we want to live with morality. We want to live with kindness. I don't want to see another mother's son killed. Okay, I want to see us learning. I would be remiss not to say the most profound thing that I did about almost a year ago is I took Nonviolence 365 that was led by Bernice King. It's a powerful workshop. And I have to honor her because I couldn't afford it. She gave me a scholarship to attend. But that's her commitment, matching my desire to build the beloved community. We all need to study. If you don't want to read Community from Community, choose Community or Chaos, which was King's last book, go on Amazon, get an audio book, listen to it. We all need to study to prove that we're ready, to shake some of the cobwebs out of our mind. And don't take all of this personal. This is God's business, ultimately. And King was a great visionary. He told us he might not go to the mountaintop with us. He didn't. He also told us that the movement had to continue. It's continuing. But we just had a 50-year gap that we should not have had. So go. You want to be about the beloved community? Learn all that you can. Learn all that you can about what nonviolence is. We can't win this with violence. Only thing we're going to do is aggravate God, and we may all not have a planet to live on.
Powerful words, sister. And I know we're going to wind up now because we're about 8:43, but I know and I appreciate, I want to just, and I had one final question. I wanted to make sure Dr. Thompson, we're at the Morehouse King Chapel, but Pastor, I know it, because you and I have talked about that you want both your assets to be safe places for people to be vulnerable and learn and grow. Back to your point, right? Because you're right. I have in my refrigerator, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And often the fear I'm overcoming is my own, but a safe place, because to be vulnerable is terrifying. And so I know you're committed to that. Thank you. And we'll talk more about that. And you also committed to that safe places because you work with women to be vulnerable, fear, getting back to a common purpose. But the point I wanted to make sure we talked about, because it's always find it, because the CEO of Netflix, I think, is from the West Coast. Where does he live? Do you know?
Yeah, he lives in California.
California.
Yeah.
What I love, a lot of folks, we talk about economic mobility in the city of Atlanta, right? And that there's not enough economic mobility of black people in the city of Atlanta and black people in our country. And I suspect, and you could tell me if I'm right, but if you want to put $1 in terms of a return on investment perspective, if you want to put $1 to black mobility, I suspect that putting $1 in the HBCUs is one of the best dollars you can put if you want to have black. If your metric is I want mobility for young, what's your thought on that?
Well, I don't have to give my thought. There's actually research on it that demonstrates that HBCUs provide more economic mobility than other institutions, higher education institutions that black people attend. So in other words, if you come to an HBCU and you're working class or poor, the likelihood that you will move into a sustained middle class existence is higher if you're here than if you go to a non-HBCU, a predominantly white institution. There's actually research that demonstrates that. You couple that with the fact that when we talk about communities, black people are more likely to invest in black communities. Black businesses are more likely to hire black people. So when you invest in the upward mobility of an individual, you're investing in that community, and there's a ripple effect to the investment of your dollar.
I know, and I appreciate that, because part of it, kind of speaking some truth, I went to Emory University over on the east side, in college. Incredibly well resourced.
Decent school.
Decent school. It's incredibly well. But if dollar for dollar, because oftentimes people say in the city our biggest issue is economic mobility for black people, but then the HBCUs are under-resourced.
That's right.
And I think that's just an acknowledgement that if that's what we want to address, invest where your dollar gives the best investment, which I think the CEO of Netflix understood.
Right, yeah. And we can even look at it. Atlanta's a very philanthropic city. And there are donations from institutions in Atlanta that come to the HBCUs, but if you compare them proportionately, the investment in predominantly white higher education institutions here dwarfs on a per student basis the investment that has come to the HBCUs. And so anyway, yeah.
Facts are facts.
Facts are facts.
Thank you for sharing those facts. And we're going to, and actually we were trying something new in our summits now is because Makeda, you talked about learning. Winston, you're always learning, always teaching me often. You're always learning, and one way we learn is learn from others. So we thought we would do some best practice, bring in learning from other places, because one thing about learning is, wow, lots of learning around the world. Dr. King learned all the, right? So we're lucky, a colleague that worked with us, Brendan Dougherty, did an interview with a leading national foundation, actually headed by, at the Ford Foundation. Didn't interview the CEO, but interviewed someone that works at the Ford Foundation, which funds a lot of best practice stuff around the world and thinks about it. So we thought it would be interesting to hear some perspectives from the Ford Foundation. It's also interesting to me that when the HBCUs started, my learning has been, it didn't, and for the time it would make sense, didn't come from Southern money, right? It was the North that funded the founding of the HBCUs.
Yep.
That's right. So interesting to hear now from the Ford Foundation. We're going to cut to this pre-recorded interview, and I want to clap for if you're out there, let's clap for our panel who came out early this morning. And I hope we can come back because I love this conversation. I had a hard time, not wanting to go deeper into things. And I want to say thank you because every time I'm with y'all and each of you, I'm always learning and I'm grateful because it gives me an opportunity because you know what I want to be tomorrow? Better. And so thank you for helping me be better. And I really want to thank you for letting us be here in such a special, sacred place this morning. And so thank you.
It's our pleasure.
All right.
And thank the Westside for its commitment to help us be better.
Amen.
Well, thank y'all. Thank you, panel. Let's cut with that pre-recorded interview.
Hello and welcome to the Transform Westside Summit. I'm Brendan Dougherty. I am working with the Westside Future Fund to help bring in ideas and leadership from outside of Atlanta city limits into Atlanta. And I'm thrilled because I'm here today with Hillary Pennington, who is the Executive Vice President for Program at the Ford Foundation. Welcome, Hillary.
Thanks, Brendan. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so good to see you. So the theme of this week's summit is Chaos or Community, and it's the title of Dr. King's last book before he was assassinated, which is Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And I'd love to start by asking you, with that in mind, what are the things that you would say are best to invest in if we're looking to create community, this kind of community that Dr. King envisioned?
At the foundation, we talk about three things being essential to long-lasting change for justice: ideas and individuals and institutions. And I feel like we are in a moment right now where ideas, especially the ideas of racial justice and what it means to build back better, a fair and a just economy and society that we've never had before, are exploding. It's an incredible moment of opportunity. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in those kinds of ideas. They are obviously being advanced by individuals. And I think leaders, and especially young leaders in any community, are a really, really essential investment, them in their own leadership journey and in connection to each other. And then finally, you can't bring about permanent change without organizations that are adequately funded to do the long work of social change. So I think it's really those three things together.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about
that cuts across all the different dimensions of human life, right? Health and education and jobs, et cetera.
Yeah, I've noticed that the Ford Foundation has really tried to rise to this moment, and particularly around the funding. I mean, you wrote this letter a couple months ago at this, which already feels like multiple years ago, about how we're in this for the long haul with our grantees and about really taking a progressive approach around that. And then just about a week ago, Darren Walker comes out and says, look, we're going to raise a $1 billion social bond to really put this money to work now when it's needed most. What does this unprecedented time ask of all of us right now?
Well, that's a place where I think a group like your group can really contribute to the rest of the nation. You have the flexibility to think about financing in a really grounded way. And the thing we are trying to shift in philanthropy is to get many more funders to be willing to move away from one-year kinds of project grants, to say, really to do the work of social change, we need to be, that's generational work, and our grants should be 2 years long, 5 years long. They should be general core support for the institutions, and we should listen to what those leaders are trying to do and get behind their plans rather than impose our own. And you have every flexibility in the kind of capital that you have to do that. But that really requires breaking practice, a lot of traditional philanthropic practice.
Yeah, how are you getting to get that real voice? Like, how are you sort of going down to the community level to pull out from those leaders, from those voices, from the young people you mentioned? Like, because sometimes as the Westside Future Fund is a nonprofit, is always trying to get that voice from the more of the grassroots. But sometimes, it can feel like, how do you go through the noise? How do you reach that? How are you all doing that?
Well, it's hard because we're a big, clunky national, in fact, global foundation. So you have a much greater asset because you are proximate, as Brian Stephen would say, in your community. But what we try to do is we try to center people from the communities that are most impacted by the kind of injustice that we're working on. And we choose 4 organizations that are led by people from those communities, people of color, women. We know that the same kind of inequalities that cut across the rest of our society cut across funding too. And, the majority, people of color-led organizations get way less money than white-led organizations. The Center for Effective Philanthropy just came out with a study this week or last week showing that, funders are speaking to their male-led organizations much more than they are to women-led. So we have made a choice to choose 4 organizations like that, and then to really work to build the capacity of those leaders and not to leave it to chance.
One of the things I was always struck too by that you've said is about this idea that sometimes, people working on the technical solutions believe that if you've got enough evidence, if you got enough data, the public will follow. But really, it's about the hearts and minds pieces. I mean, what have you found? How do you capture that heart and mind? I mean, that's such a tough thing to do.
It's we do believe in data and evidence. Obviously, those matter, and so do models. And I would imagine that you all do a fair amount of work testing, better models for financial saving or for workforce development. So that's a thing that matters too. But I think when you're working on issues of inequality, it's not that we don't know as a society how to address inequality successfully. It's not that we don't know what works. It's that we just don't choose to do it. And so I think that there is a level of conversation in a community about what is it going to align around for the long haul. And to the degree that you have alignment among powerful people from the community who may be on your board or maybe your donors, but that they listen to the community itself and center them in and really follow their diagnosis of what it is they need, and then use their power to validate the community's own diagnosis of what it feels it needs, and a way of working with the community that will be authentic. I think so many communities have been done to and helped for so many years in ways that have been really extractive and not respectful. And so getting that kind of feedback loop, asking for the input from the community and then acting on that input and showing the community that you acted on that input is really important.
Yeah, it's that trust piece that's where it all begins, is that having the trust of the community, and that only really works from setting out an intention and then actually like delivering on it, time and again, and listening to that, to that community voice. Last question, because we're just about out of time. You said that you have to attend, I think the way you put it was you have to attend to the spirit or the soul of an organization. And I'm curious, what does it mean to do that?
I think it means to really understand deeply the mission that you have, what you are trying to do, and to think about whether or not the ways in which you work line up with that mission, and the ways in which you you organize your people, you compensate your people, you develop your people, line up with that mission as well. I think every organization gets caught up in the activity of the day, the stuff they do, and under attends to the why of it. You know, in a way also to the story, you know, the story of us that is really what the organization is. So to really step back and take the time to nurture that.
Yeah, especially in this moment, all the more important. So thank you so much for jumping on with us. I know that everyone here in Atlanta is very grateful for all the work that you're personally doing, that the Ford Foundation has helped leading at a global but also a national time right now, and just delighted to have you.
Well, it's great to be, you know, we all and the rest of the nation are watching you in Atlanta with real, you know, commitment and pride and excitement at seeing, you know, the kinds of changes that you are bringing into being. Not there yet, long way to go, but we have a lot of admiration for what's going on the ground there. So thank you, Brendan, for the chance to be with you.
You're welcome. The process of becoming. All right, thank you.
That is the thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary Pittman from the Ford Foundation. That was awesome. So we're going to go a couple minutes past 9, so I hope you'll just stick with us, but just want to acknowledge that I'm pleased to announce the winner of our Home Depot gift card, Terry Ross. Terry, if you're listening, I miss your voice, miss Terry Ross's voice. Home Depot gift card winner, so you'll be collecting that gift card. And now we wanted to also move and appreciating so many voices to give, to lift up and give perspective to, but we're going to go now to a song that was put together by, Charles' son here, Joshua Meredith, and he's a young man, 12 years old, and this is his expression of how he feels about what's going on. We think it's important to get so many, we talked about that on the live panel, the people need to have their voices heard. So this is his artistic expression. And we're not going to show the full video. We're going to show about 3 minutes. You can see the entire video on his Instagram account, the Meredith Boys. So the entire video on his Instagram account, the Meredith Boys. But we're going to show about 3 minutes. Come back to me for about 30 seconds, and then we're done.
One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory, glory. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glorious destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Against to go against our skins become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. Children living in us, resisted as us. That's why Rosa shot on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to a mountaintop and we ran up. When the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory, glory. Now the war's not over. Victory isn't won, and we'll fight on to the finish. And then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh glory, glory. Selma is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we to go hundreds of miles. From dark roads he rose to become a hero. Facing the leader, justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, what king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald ego. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory. One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory, glory.
Thank you for that song, and thank you for that artistic expression, and thank you for joining us this morning. And as we close out, I want to give a little bit of a personal reflection that last night I was watching one of my favorite instructional movies, The Matrix. I don't know how many times I've watched that movie, but I love that movie. And Morpheus, toward the end, talking to Neo, says, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. But I've come to appreciate we're going to have to do both. We got to learn, but then we got to walk the path. And I want to invite you, on behalf of the Westside Future Fund, I think on behalf of all our panelists this morning, you heard the things we talked about, because I know what I want. I want to be part of a new Westside future, grounded in justice, grounded in equity, grounded in empowerment, grounded in ownership. So come join us and build a new Westside future. We're not going to be broadcasting on July, the first Friday in July, because it's to protect our national holiday, but we'll be back later in July to talk about how we join together, build that new Westside future. Thank you.